A restaurant manager at Moto named Lujin failed to persuade one of the abalone restaurants to sell. This made his superior, Hanbombo, extremely angry, even saying he would no longer acknowledge him. Bombo is the director of Moto restaurant under the Hansang company, arrogant, cunning, and ambitious. Those traits perfectly describe his personality. He even holds meetings immediately, regardless of whether some members haven't arrived yet. Meanwhile, an older man is protesting because Bombo stole his recipe and shut down his restaurant, but Bombo ignores the protest and instead heads to the abalone restaurant that Eugen previously failed to convince. He threatens to expose Sumi's involvement in illegal gambling if he doesn't convince his mother to make a deal. It turns out that every menu item in Bombo's Moto restaurant is stolen. Once he acquires a recipe, the original restaurant is shut down. However, among all the stolen recipes, there is still one dish that has not yet been completed. This makes Bombo furious, especially because the head chef is busy doing a photo shoot instead of working. Chef Zhang is annoyed because Bombo added a new dish without her approval. For her, the popularity she gained could help the restaurant's marketing, but Bombo insists that her only job is to cook according to the recipe and make the food look delicious. Therefore, Chef Zhang must finish the main dish that will be launched the day after tomorrow. Behind all this, Bombo has an older brother named Sunwo. He is the CEO of Hansang and the owner of Lalacel restaurant, which has 2 stars, while Bombo's restaurant only has 1. The two brothers never get along and constantly compete to earn the prestigious 3-star rating. Their mother, the head of Hansang, is extremely perfectionistic. She is arrogant but acts very friendly in front of others. Even a chef who worked for 7 years was fired over a trivial issue. She then gives her children a condition: whoever earns a 3-star rating first will become the next owner of Hansang. This makes the rivalry between them even more intense. Moto's new main dish is finally completed and will be launched tomorrow as scheduled, but suddenly Eugen reports that another restaurant has a similar dish. Bombo immediately goes to that restaurant, located in a small town called Jiangje. He arrives during lunchtime and even steps on mustard greens, angering the owner, a beautiful young woman named Yunju. Bombo's goal is to taste the dish that resembles his, but Yunju refuses because she has run out of ingredients. Due to his arrogant attitude, Yunju tells Bombo to go get beef from Mawan farm, while she prepares the other ingredients and buys eggs. Strangely, the farm owner is sick, and her husband is too scared to collect the eggs because the chickens always peck him. Bombo later returns with beef carrying a fake label, which Yunju quickly notices. Then they climb a hill to gather mushrooms. The mushrooms must be picked gently so they don't bruise, as even slight damage can affect the flavor when cooked. After gathering all the ingredients, Yunju finally begins cooking. Bombo tastes the kimchi and the flavor reminds him of his grandmother. He even starts to feel mesmerized by Yunju's beauty. After tasting the incredibly delicious dish, Bombo considers helping her by acquiring the restaurant, but Yunju refuses. To her, Bombo is nothing more than an arrogant, money-hungry man who knows nothing about process, hard work, or sincerity. Without sincerity, what's the point of opening a restaurant? The next day, Yunju remembered what Bombo had said, that sincerity alone is not enough to run a restaurant if it doesn't make money. It turned out to be true. Yunju still couldn't pay the rent for the place. If she couldn't pay by next month, she would have to move out, and the landlord even took back the gift she had once given her. Meanwhile, the owner of the restaurant whom Bombo had threatened attempted suicide. The media reported that it was caused by the threats from Hansang and the fear of losing his restaurant. This caused the company's stock price to drop, and Sunwo suggested that Bombo be fired. The board agreed, and Bombo was officially dismissed. He then tried to visit Sumi at the hospital to apologize, but instead overheard a phone conversation revealing that Sumi had been working together with Sunwo to get rid of him. Even his mother didn't care about Sunwo's cheating. All that mattered to them was that Bombo had failed and caused the stock price to fall. For the time being, his restaurant would be managed by his brother. Bombo eventually returned to see Yunju. He offered to take care of the rent by making an acquisition deal, but Yunju only accepted investment, not a takeover. She also required Bombo to work there to determine whether the restaurant was worth investing in. At first Bombo refused, but then he received a message from Eugen saying that their operating funds would be cut in a few days. With no other choice, he had to agree to Yunju's terms. However, the contract came with many conditions. One of them was that Yunju would have full control of the kitchen, while Bombo would handle the dining area. Bombo's main objective, however, was to steal the recipe and open a new restaurant. The next day, Yoonju secretly made a transaction in the corner of the market. Bombo happened to see it and assumed she was dealing drugs, when in reality she was only buying chili powder and kitchen supplies. Unfortunately, the man named Aldu refused to give her any more credit because Yoonju often owed money to his vegetable shop. Who would have thought that chili powder was so valuable to her? Bombo suggested lowering the quality of ingredients to pay off the debt, but Yoonju refused, insisting that using the best ingredients was her principle. Bombo then planned to renovate the restaurant by adding 2 tables and using every available space, but if they did that, Yoonju wouldn't be able to manage it alone, meaning they needed to hire someone. Bombo, of course, suggested hiring an elite worker, a CIA graduate from a prestigious culinary school in the US and a former employee at a 3-star restaurant in Japan, with the belief that hiring a professional would be beneficial, but in reality, their small restaurant wasn't suitable for someone like that. In the end, Yoonju hired Myeongso, an older woman who loved watching Korean dramas and had 15 years of restaurant experience. Bombo disapproved, but he couldn't argue because the kitchen was Yoonju's domain. Meanwhile, he still hadn't brought the new tables for the dining area, leading Yoonju to think he had no money. When Bombo tried to rent a hotel, he received news that his bank account and car would be suspended. Because of that, he had to return the card to the office. He ended up renting a small room in an alley and even handed over his expensive suit just to pay for the stay. In exchange, he was given old clothes belonging to the inn owner. The next day, Bombo traded his expensive watch to buy 2 tables, but Yoonju was surprised by his clothes, which had the name, Samsik, printed on the back. That day they were preparing to open the restaurant. Bombo invited his influencer friends to help promote the place, but none of them came. Only one person agreed, but he accidentally posted a selfie of himself instead. Bombo also didn't like Myeongso's attitude of asking for advance payment, speaking casually, and even watching Korean dramas while washing dishes. This made Myeongso annoyed as well because Bombo only played on his phone and laptop while claiming he was managing the restaurant's marketing. What made Bombo even angrier was when Myeongso bought food from outside during work hours and spilled it on the table. On top of that, his influencer friends canceled their promotional help, making him even more furious before he stormed out. While sitting outside, Hukso and Aldu suddenly hit him, mistaking him for someone named Samsik because Bombo was wearing their soccer team's shirt. In the end, they invited Bombo to drink as their new member, and he vented all his frustrations about Yoonju being so stubborn. They decided to support him by giving him chili powder, believing that Bombo could help Yoonju become a brilliant chef. Bombo returned with the chili powder. Shortly after, Hukso and Aldu arrived with all the members of their soccer club, making the restaurant suddenly crowded. After work, Myeongso acted completely differently. They planned to go out and have fun, but suddenly a young man driving a sports car arrived. He was Chun-sung, the son of the owner of Kdrama restaurant where Myeongso used to work. He came to pick her up, assuming they had stolen his employee. It turned out that before leaving her old job, Myeongso had bragged that someone else had offered her a position, which led to her being kicked out. She claimed she would earn 1 million won, stay in hotels, and become a chef, yet in 15 years of working she had received nothing and was always looked down upon. They all ended up drinking heavily until they were drunk. At that moment, Bombo found himself mesmerized once again by Yoonju's beauty, but soon after, he received news that Chef Jang was now working for Lala Cell. He immediately called her in anger, and Yoonju accidentally saw it, misunderstanding that Bombo had been abandoned by his girlfriend who was cheating with his brother. Moments later, a drunk Chun-sung also appeared. After being scolded by his father for failing to bring back Myeongso, he kept insisting that he was the owner of the restaurant. Bombo tried to stop him, but they ended up pulling each other's hair in a ridiculous fight. Yoonju assumed that Bombo had come there to calm himself after losing his girlfriend. Even though he tried to explain, she didn't believe him. The next morning, Yoojin told Bombo to simply steal the recipe and that she would handle everything else. So Bombo tried persuading Yoonju to cook the same dish as before so he could watch and copy the process, but soon the landlord arrived with a new tenant because the place would be turned into a storage room. Rumors had spread that Yoonju's restaurant had gone bankrupt, making them furious, and they immediately confronted Chun-sung, thinking he was the one who spread the gossip. Not long after, they received a report claiming that Yoonju's restaurant violated fire safety regulations. even though fire extinguishers were installed in every corner. The district then received another report stating that the restaurant lacked a health certificate, so Yoonju quickly showed hers. But the authorities discovered illegal Korean chili powder, forcing Yoonju to go to the police station to sort it out. She asked Bombo not to cause any trouble, but Bombo felt he had to do something for their restaurant. He teamed up with Myeongso to report Chunseung's garage for illegal building expansion, further escalating the conflict. In retaliation, Chunseung parked his sports car right in front of Yoonju's restaurant, blocking the entrance and preventing them from opening. To retaliate, Bombo used Aldu's pickup truck to block the entrance of Chunseung's restaurant. All the chaos immediately made Yoonju furious because they couldn't open their own restaurant due to the truck blocking the way. The next day, Bombo accompanied Yoonju to visit one of their suppliers who hadn't delivered ingredients for several days and couldn't be contacted. They had to travel quite far to reach the place. At first, they suspected Chunseung was behind it again, but it turned out the owner was simply sick. In the end, Yoonju prepared the ingredients herself with Bombo's help, and that made him admire her once again.
이쁘네.
When they returned, it was already nighttime. Heavy rain began pouring down, forcing them to run while holding hands. Yoonju even started to show more affection toward him. Soon after, they received news that their restaurant had caught fire. The windows were shattered, leading the police to suspect arson. However, without CCTV cameras in the area, it was hard to identify the culprit. Myeongso suspected Chunseung, because earlier he had been in the area while drunk. Yoonju immediately confronted him in anger, but Chunseung didn't remember anything. What was certain was that he had broken the restaurant's window while drunk while carrying lighter fluid. He begged them not to report him to the police and promised to compensate the damage, but he only had 1 million won. Yoonju eventually gave him 3 days to fix the restaurant. Meanwhile, Chef Jang was now working for La La Sel restaurant and served Moto's signature dish to President Hansang, who was actually Sungwo's mother. However, the taste was far from impressive despite its beautiful presentation, leaving President Hansang disappointed. She warned Sungwo that unlike him, his younger brother Bombo would never betray her. She preferred cutting people off with a cold gaze instead of giving them second chances. In the end, Sungwo secretly ordered someone to monitor Bombo, and Chef Jang overheard the entire conversation. Meanwhile, Chunseung began renovating Yoonju's restaurant, but instead of improving anything, he made the place even messier. He basically couldn't do anything right because he had always been spoiled as a child and grew up to be a troublemaker and a drunk. Perhaps that was why his father never left him any inheritance. That fact made him cry because he also had dreams, yet whenever he tried to do something, his father never trusted him. Bombo eventually taught him how to fix the walls, because he understood how it felt to work hard yet never earn a parent's trust. While they were repairing the restaurant, Yoonju and Myeongso prepared some food. Even though it was simple, eating after working together felt incredibly satisfying. Moments later, Aldu arrived to inform them that the total cost to repair the restaurant would be 5 million won, but his real intention was to show them a cooking competition held in food trucks with a 5 million won prize. They had to register before 6 p.m., but it was already 5:45, leaving only 15 minutes before registration closed. It seemed impossible to get there on time. That was when Chunseung volunteered to be their lightning-fast driver. Taking an alternative route, they arrived just as registration was about to close, and through teamwork, they managed to slip in their registration form. On the way back to the inn, Bombo unexpectedly ran into Chef Jang. Not wanting his real situation to be exposed, Bombo told Yoonju that she was his ex-girlfriend. Bombo then took Chef Jang elsewhere to talk and told her that the woman earlier was a far better chef than her, urging her to leave. Later that night, Bombo couldn't stop thinking about Yoonju's charm. He rambled endlessly about her, to the point that his neighbors became annoyed. The next morning, he finally realized that his neighbor was Yoonju. It turned out her house was also affected by the fire, so she stayed there for the night. While shopping, Bombo thought the crabs were in love with each other, even though all of them were female. Yoonju also rejected all of Bombo's ideas for the upcoming festival menu. He jokingly suggested serving kimbap, but Yoonju actually accepted the idea because it was easy to make and everyone liked it. Bombo tried suggesting they add something interesting like premium meat, but Yoonju refused.
김밥도 그런 거라고.
That day, they began preparing for the festival. Unfortunately, Chunseung rented an old and dirty truck, so they had to clean it first. The first day of the festival finally began, and Bombo was shocked to see that Hansang was sponsoring the event. It turned out to be his brother's doing, and he even increased the grand prize to 10 million won. Hansang's own restaurant also joined the festival, and their food truck was the most luxurious, with Chef Jang as their chef. Yoonju immediately recognized her as Bombo's ex-girlfriend. Meanwhile, Bombo confronted Chef Jang to ask what she was planning. It turned out she wanted to prove his claim from the other day that Yoonju was better than her. Yoojin was also there, claiming to be a double agent spying on Lalasel. The festival soon began. Hansang's food truck served luxurious premium duck, while Yoonju only had kimbap. Not long after, Bombo arrived with premium ingredients. To attract attention, they had to add something unique, especially since the prize money had doubled. Although Yoonju was hesitant at first, she eventually changed the menu by adding beef on the outside. The combination turned out perfect and drew many visitors, including food vloggers. Meanwhile, Hansang's unique dishes were also popular. Visitors tasted each dish and gave points. Unexpectedly, Yoonju's beef-wrapped kimbap sold out before the others, making them extremely happy. At the same time, customers at the Hansang truck began leaving because the wait time was too long. That day's events left Sungwoo disappointed because Chef Jang herself had insisted on joining the festival, yet the results were underwhelming. Sungwoo planned to bring in more visitors to help her. Meanwhile, Yoonju accidentally found a lighter in her restaurant. She thought it belonged to Bombo, but it didn't. The second day of the festival began with the arrival of a famous K-pop singer, making the festival even livelier and attracting more visitors. The autograph session was held next to Hansang's truck, which made Bombo furious, so he scolded Chef Jang, especially since they were now also selling kimbap. Chef Jang even belittled Yoonju, so Yoonju challenged her to stop talking and let their food speak for itself.
그쪽도 셰프라면서요?
To overcome the situation, Chun-sung suggested changing the menu and adding his homemade non-alcoholic fermented drink. Although they initially refused, they changed their minds after tasting it. The drink would be given for free to attract customers. People would get their autographs first and then head to the Hansang truck. But soon, a vlogger asked for regular kimbap because he was tired of all the flavored versions being sold everywhere. They turned that into their new menu. Plain kimbap, combined with the free fermented drink. More people became interested. Some visitors even asked where their restaurant was because the kimbap reminded them of their childhood. In addition, Chun-sung and Myeongso made up a story that Bombo and Yoonju were newlyweds selling kimbap to afford milk for their child, and the child's name was Kimbap. The food truck festival finally ended, and the vote counting was completed, revealing that Hansang had won the festival, while Yoonju took second place. Of course, they felt it was unfair. Even so, Yoonju accepted it with an open heart. At the very least, the prize money could still be used to repair the restaurant. Meanwhile, Chun-sung sensed foul play. A few minutes before the final count, he had checked the votes himself and saw that their restaurant was leading over Hansang. His words made Bombo realize something was wrong. He immediately confronted his brother, even suspecting that he was the one who burned down Yoonju's restaurant. The victory also made Chef Jang feel superior to Yoonju and made her realize that Bombo liked her. Her comment left him stunned for a moment. Even though she had won, Chef Jang was still curious about Yoonju's kimbap, and it turned out to be truly delicious. Meanwhile, Bombo hurried to see Yoonju, who was playing with the children. She kept winning their games until she had to leave, holding Bombo by the hand. Yoonju was so happy after winning so much, but that smile made Bombo realize even more that he had fallen for her. He confessed his feelings and even kissed her. Unfortunately, Chun-sung and Myeongso saw everything. Yoonju's restaurant was finally renovated, but she kept avoiding the topic whenever the incident from the previous night was brought up. Bombo, on the other hand, acted as if it confirmed how close they were, which caused Chun-sung and Myeongso to freak out. This made Yoonju angry. She firmly stated that what happened last night was a mistake. Not long after, a French-speaking couple visited their restaurant. As it happened, Bombo could speak French too. They were interested after tasting the food at the festival and wanted to hold a family meeting at the restaurant. The woman's parents were coming, but her mother couldn't eat spicy or salty Korean food. Meanwhile, the man's father was a local who preferred traditional Korean dishes, and the couple's relationship hadn't been approved by their families. Before hearing the full explanation, Yoonju immediately refused, saying the kitchen wasn't ready. Surprisingly, she could speak French too. However, they believed this event was a great opportunity to build the restaurant's image, so Yoonju eventually agreed to host the gathering. That night, Bombo tried to explain that what happened the previous night had indeed been a mistake, but the more he explained, the more Chunsung and Myeongso were convinced that it wasn't a mistake. Meanwhile, Yoonju kept remembering the couple's words from earlier and searched for the perfect menu for the event, but instead of finding inspiration, Bombo's perverted face kept popping into her mind. While getting some fresh air, she ran into a drunk Bombo, who begged her to take back her words that last night had been a mistake. Bombo desperately wanted to be with her. He promised to stay professional at work and not mix their relationship with business. He asked her to go on a date after serving the guests, then Yoonju could decide whether she wanted to be in a relationship with him or not. The next day, Bombo arrived with new uniforms for restaurant Janjae, but Chunsung felt upset for not getting one. Eventually, he received a uniform too and officially started working at the restaurant. In the VIP cabin of an airplane, a passenger complained that the food was salty and tough. He ordered the flight attendant to cook it again according to the proper instructions. As it was his recipe, the passenger turned out to be John Min, the head chef of the 3-star restaurant Le Murier. He even told the flight attendant to stop serving that menu entirely, saying it would only damage the reputation of his restaurant. Meanwhile, Yoonju and Bombo were out buying food supplies to welcome their guests. Bungso, the owner of the butcher shop, felt that Bombo had become much more humane, very different from their first meeting when he acted arrogantly, as if money could solve everything. Yoonju noticed this change too, and it made her start to like him. But when they returned, the man from the plane showed up to see Yoonju. She immediately told him to leave. It turns out they once worked together at the Le Murier restaurant, and even had a special relationship as lovers. One day, Inspector Diamond came for a visit. Diamond was the person responsible for awarding stars to restaurants with excellent food, but that day, they made a mistake that ruined Le Murier's reputation, making the head chef Tatsuya furious. The one who actually made the mistake was John Min, but Yoonju took the blame, saying she was responsible and would resign to protect her lover. After that incident, Yoonju returned to Korea and rented an abandoned place to start her own restaurant. Time went by, but she never heard from John Min again, as if he had completely forgotten her. Of course, this made Yoonju angry and unable to forgive him, but just as they were about to close for the day, John Min returned to apologize. Bombo and the others pretended to go home, but they were actually eavesdropping on their conversation. That was when Myeongso realized he had seen John Min before. He had seen him in a photo while cleaning up the restaurant after the fire. From there, Bombo learned that Yoonju once worked at the 3-star restaurant Le Murier, and that she was actually a Culinary Institute of America graduate. No wonder her cooking had always been so delicious. John Min apologized for coming so late and admitted that he took Yoonju's place at Le Murier to become famous, but Yoonju insisted that leaving Le Murier was her own decision, then told him to go. Bombo also urged him to leave because they needed to rest. An important guest was coming tomorrow. The next morning, the important guests arrived. Bombo and Chunsung welcomed them warmly. Yoonju and Myeongso had already prepared several dishes, but the father of the groom refused to touch them because they weren't Korean. In the end, they made his favorite local dish. The delicious taste, along with a fusion of Korean and French dishes, lifted his mood. Chunsung's homemade fermented drink also eased the tension, turning the atmosphere cheerful. In the end, both families approved the couple's relationship despite their cultural differences. Before leaving, the bride's father admitted it was the best meal he had ever had, revealing that he was actually a culinary expert. After everything ended, Bombo reminded Yoonju about the date she had agreed to, but then John Min returned. Yoonju had invited him for dinner, and everyone else was asked to go home. Bombo was told to wait because she would come before 9 p.m. Yoonju served dishes she used to eat after work, to remind him that the past and present were no longer the same, but John Min believed everything could be fixed, and that Yoonju could return to Le Murier, the restaurant she once loved so much. Meanwhile, Bombo waited anxiously until Yoonju finally arrived. They went on their date on the rooftop to watch a movie, but Yoonju ended up falling asleep. After that, they took a walk around the village of Hano. There, Yoonju told Bombo about her past, how she had been an orphan, abandoned at a temple as a baby and raised by monks. As she grew older, she fell in love with cooking and used her skills to make a living, eventually earning a chance to study at the CIA and later working in Japan at the Le Murier restaurant. From there, Yoonju met Jeonmin, the man she truly liked, because he was the first person who had ever treated her kindly. Jeonmin's reason for coming to Korea was to bring her back to Le Murier. Yoonju said she wouldn't go because her restaurant had finally started to grow, which made Bombo feel relieved. However, the next day Yoonju went to Japan, leaving behind a letter asking them to take care of the restaurant until she returned. In the letter, there was also a drawing of a clay jar. After searching, they found Yoonju's guidebook and recipe manual, including seasonal menus and instructions for caring for the organic vegetables. There were also warnings: Bombo was not allowed to smoke in the area, Chunsung was forbidden to get drunk near the garden, and Myeongso was told never to pick fights with older people at the market, and there were still many more notes they needed to read. For now, Myeongso would replace Yoonju as the cook, Chunsung would harvest the vegetables, and Bombo had to collect eggs from the chicken coop. Even with the recipes written clearly, Myeongso still made mistakes, causing customers to leave. That was when they finally realized just how skilled Yoonju truly was. Meanwhile, Chef Jang was furious because she was going to be replaced by someone. Sunwo felt she couldn't earn a 3-star rating for the restaurant, and that made Chef Jang realize that Bombo was far better than him. In the end, she chose to return to Modo restaurant. Elsewhere, Bombo dreamed that Yoonju had gotten back together with Jeonmin. Soon after, Myeongso arrived with Yoojin. They had met at the market, and Yoojin flirted with her until she thought he liked her. Then he turned his attention to Bombo, treating him like a younger brother, which made Bombo angry. His real intention was to help steal their recipes and reopen Modo restaurant, but Bombo felt he had to stop doing such things. Unfortunately, he didn't dare to confess because he feared Yoojin would reveal that he originally came there to steal Yoonju's recipes. At that moment, Myeongso was deeply love-struck and revealed all the secret ingredients. This made Bombo quickly hide Yoonju's recipe book. Myeongso's behavior also annoyed Chunsung, so Bombo convinced him to work together to deal with it by inviting Yoojin to drink with them in Chunsung's garage. They drank from Chunsung's large alcohol collection, while Bombo only pretended to drink. In the end, Chunsung, the drinking king, managed to make Yoojin completely pass out. A moment later, Bombo received a call from Yoonju, but he heard Jeonmin's voice in the background before the call suddenly ended, so Bombo locked Yoojin inside the garage and planned to release him only after returning from Japan. He borrowed money from Chunsung to chase after Yoonju, and Chunsung even took money from his father to help him. Meanwhile, Yoonju had arrived in Japan. Her purpose was to visit Chef Tatsuya, who was gravely ill. His condition was so severe that he no longer recognized Yoonju. He refused to eat anything except whatever dish he had in mind. But no one knew what that was. Jeonmin believed that Yoonju's cooking could restore his memory. Since Chef Tatsuya had always loved her dishes, Jeonmin also took Yoonju to visit Le Murier, the restaurant where they once worked together, which brought back old memories and reminded Yoonju of how deeply she respected Chef Tatsuya. Yoonju finally asked Jeonmin to help her find out what food Chef Tatsuya truly wanted, and at the same time, Jeonmin told her that he would soon become the head of the Le Murier restaurant. He wanted Yoonju to return and work there instead of holding on to her rundown restaurant. But suddenly, Bombo appeared. He was upset because their restaurant was considered shabby. In truth, Bombo came because he missed her and was afraid that Yoonju might never come back. Meanwhile, Yoonju was only there to settle a few matters. Jeonmin had taken Yoonju to the market to look around and reminisce about their past memories, but unfortunately, Bombo kept becoming the third wheel between them, making the rivalry unavoidable. Jeonmin revealed that he had dated Yoonju for 3 years and that they once promised to open a restaurant outside Seoul called Jangjae. That fact disturbed Bombo's thoughts for a moment. Not long after, he received a call from Chef Jang. Chef Jang had previously visited Lala Chel to gather information. It turned out that Sunwo had used a cheating code to take over the Hansang group by hiring Jeonmin as head chef and purchasing Le Murier, a restaurant that already had 3 diamond stars. When Bombo was about to go back inside, he saw how happy Yoonju looked while being with Jeonmin, but the mood changed when Jeonmin asked her to return to Le Murier. He explained that the reason he had held on for so long was to protect both his position and Yoonju's, but unfortunately, Yoonju still refused the offer. Shortly after, Jeonmin received a message from Sunwo telling him they needed to discuss something important, so he had to leave immediately. Bombo then stayed with Yoonju and accompanied her for drinks, but even that didn't help her remember Chef Tatsuya's favorite dish. Yoonju deeply respected Chef Tatsuya. He was the reason Yoonju came to Japan after graduating from the CIA, turning down offers from America and France, but since the restaurant lost a star, Yoonju was forced to leave. Bombo then took her for a walk to cheer her up, and by chance, they came across a small shop serving sea urchin ramen. The ramen was unique, and the shop owner explained that the recipe came from his old friend, who used to be a chef but had now forgotten everything. His friend once asked him to make ramen with added uni, or sea urchin, but was disappointed because it didn't taste like the one made by someone he used to know. The story made Yoonju realize the truth. The person he mentioned was Chef Tatsuya. It turned out Chef Tatsuya had desperately wanted to eat Yoonju's ramen again before becoming seriously ill. That ramen was a simple staff meal Yoonju used to cook when she was still a beginner. Bombo assured her that the ramen was indeed Chef Tatsuya's final wish, so Yoonju decided she needed to buy fresh uni from the market right away. Before leaving, she gave Bombo a kiss. Meanwhile, Yoojin had woken up. He couldn't get out and was only given food through the gap under the door. He eventually threatened to break all of Chunsung's liquor collection if the door wasn't opened. With no other choice, Chunsung opened it, but suddenly, Chef Jang arrived looking for Yoojin, and in the end, Chunsung was the one locked inside the room instead. Chef Jang felt she had to secure the recipe before the weekend because she had received information that the diamond inspector had arrived in Korea and was tasting dishes in every restaurant. On the other hand, Bombo invited Jeonmin to meet so he could confirm his relationship with Hansang and Sunwo. He was certain that all of this was their plan to take over the Lemuria restaurant. Bombo also felt that Jeonmin didn't need Lemuria anymore since he was about to become the head chef at Lalacell, but then why did he keep pressuring Yoonju to return to Lemuria? This made Jeonmin irritated, and he said that among all of them, Bombo was actually the most suspicious, born into a wealthy family, yet choosing to work in a small corner restaurant with Yoonju. The next day, Bombo couldn't be reached and arrived late, but he eventually returned carrying ingredients from Korea that were urgently needed to make the soup. Later, they found some medicine in the trash bin, and at that moment, Jeonmin arrived and admitted that the medicine belonged to him. He also offered to help cook ramen for Chef Tatsuya, the old man, and their growing closeness made Bombo feel jealous. In the end, the ramen was served to Chef Tatsuya, and the strong flavor brought back his memories of Yoonju, and he apologized for not standing up for her during the incident in the past. After that, Jeonmin announced that he would take over the Lemuria restaurant for Chef Tatsuya's sake. He had found investors from abroad to save Lemuria, which was on the verge of collapsing, but Yoonju didn't believe him, because she had discovered that the medicine found yesterday actually belonged to Chef Tatsuya. So why did Jeonmin throw it away? Yoonju suspected that he was intentionally delaying things so he could sell Lemuria. However, Jeonmin stopped the rumors from spreading because they could cause Lemuria to go bankrupt even faster, and he said he was doing it to make sure the staff could still receive their salaries. His decision to collaborate with the Hansang company was final, but unfortunately, Bombo revealed that the partnership had already fallen apart. It turned out that Bombo had contacted his mother earlier, asking her to return as a board member, and she took an early flight to cancel the acquisition of Lemuria. Then Bombo flew back to Japan. This revelation made Jeonmin furious, and a fight broke out between them. In the end, Chef Tatsuya told them to stop fighting. He still believed that Lemuria meant a lot to Jeonmin, and he suggested they look for another solution together. After everything that happened, Jeonmin apologized for all his mistakes. Because of him, Yoonju had to give up chasing her dream. But in reality, Yoonju had never given up. She now felt that she was finally on the right path. Even though things could never return to how they used to be, she would always treasure those memories. Eventually, Bombo and Yoonju returned to Korea and their arrival made Myeongso happy. However, she was annoyed because Chunsung had skipped work without notice. While discussing Yoojin's disappearance, Bombo suddenly ran to the garage and found Chunsung trapped inside. After discovering that all of this was orchestrated by Chef Jang and Yoojin, Bombo rushed back to the restaurant to look for Yoonju's recipe book, but unfortunately, it was missing. It turned out that Yoojin and Chef Jang had broken into the restaurant to steal the recipe. Bombo immediately traveled to Seoul to take it back, but by then, Chef Jang had already used the recipes to prepare a dish for Inspector Diamond. Even though she changed the cooking method a little, the dish still pleased the inspector. Bombo arrived only after they had finished eating. He believed Chef Jang's actions were wrong, but everything she did was based on what Bombo had taught her all this time. For that reason, Chef Jang told him to finish his business and return to his position. Maybe he wouldn't lose his job if he changed his mind. But Bombo couldn't stop thinking about the people who worked there. That day, Bombo also left a note saying he wouldn't come to work because he was sick. Meanwhile, Myeongso and Chunsung ended up arguing because Chunsung had skipped work without permission the previous day, leaving Myeongso to do everything alone, even though Chunsung had actually been locked in the garage at the time.
그것이 중요한 거 아니고.
That night, Bombo returned to the restaurant to secretly put the recipe book back, but unexpectedly, Yoonju was there, not to scold him, but to give him porridge so he could recover quickly. Her kindness made Bombo want to confess the truth about himself, but he still couldn't bring himself to say it. The next morning, both Myeonso and Chunsung skipped work. They vented their frustrations toward each other until they ran into each other on the street and ended up arguing again. In the end, Bombo and Yoonju arrived and invited them on a short trip to relieve their stress. That day, the restaurant remained open. Bombo greeted a customer with a bright smile, but after the man left, he realized that the customer was the same man who had staged a protest at the beginning of the film. The lighter he carried was also identical to the one from that day, so Bombo hurried to find him. For 93 days, the man had protested without any results. His frustration led him to burn down Yoonju's restaurant. He did it right after Chunsung had broken into the restaurant. After Chunsung left, the man returned and set the fire. He wanted to prove that even a worm will fight back when stepped on, but Bombo didn't realize that the man was referring to himself as the worm. Acting as if nothing had happened, Bombo kept living with a smile, until the man questioned why Bombo treated the restaurant differently. Did Bombo also know that he was a traitor? His words started weighing heavily on Bombo, who warned him never to show up again, otherwise he would make sure the man went to jail for burning Yoonju's restaurant. After that, Bombo received an order from his mother to shut down Yoonju's restaurant and return to Moto, because the recipe they obtained had already satisfied Diamond. This left Bombo confused and unsure of what to do next. The following day, their vacation began, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of a fun trip, it was a visit to a temple in the mountains. The monks and nuns there knew Yoonju like their own niece, because they had raised her since childhood. They planned several activities and meditation sessions to calm their hearts and minds. That night, Yoonju shared stories about her childhood at the temple. The head nun had been like a mother to her, raising her with love and care. From her, Yoonju learned to cook, and that passion eventually led her to the CIA, which required her to leave the temple. They were very special to Yoonju, so she wanted Bombo to meet them as well. Yoonju also wanted to hear about Bombo's past, but Bombo still couldn't tell her because it was too difficult for him. Meanwhile, Yoojin and the staff at Moto received news that they had earned 3 stars from Diamond, which made them extremely happy, but the news became a disaster for Sunwo, the owner of La La Cell, especially because he had received a message from his younger siblings saying they wouldn't return to Moto and didn't want to inherit Hansang. By the time Bombo and the others returned home, Bombo immediately went to meet Yoonju to talk privately. He wanted to finally confess everything, but it was still too heavy for him. Suddenly Sunwo arrived and exposed Bombo's real intention from the beginning, stealing the recipe from the restaurant. He even revealed that Moto gained its 3-star rating using that recipe. Of course, this made Yoonju furious and deeply disappointed, because Bombo had taken advantage of her sincerity.
언제 말하려고 했는데?
Sunwo only exposed everything because Bombo had claimed he no longer needed Hansang, but Bombo didn't care anymore. He walked away, feeling lost and directionless, only able to apologize because he had never managed to tell Yoonju the truth about everything. On the other hand, the Hansang company was celebrating the success of Moto Restaurant as the first 3-star restaurant in Korea, and Bombo's mother also received an offer from a TV station to film a documentary about her journey in achieving that prestigious award, but she immediately rejected the offer, feeling that they only wanted to ride on the fame of Hansang's achievement. Meanwhile, Yoonju told Myeonso and Chunsung that from now on the restaurant would be run only by the 3 of them, making Myeonso realize there was something going on between Yoonju and Bombo, but the clueless Chunsung simply assumed they were just arguing like always. That day Yoonju was so down that she couldn't focus and made several mistakes, while Chunsung struggled because he had to deliver food and handle payments at the same time. In the end Myeonso asked what was happening, and Yoonju explained that Bombo had stolen her recipes and planned to shut down their restaurant. The truth made them disappointed as well, and for the time being Yoonju decided to close the restaurant. Meanwhile, Bombo returned to Moto Restaurant to pack his things. He felt that everything was his fault. Bombo apologized and decided to resign before leaving the place. The news of Bombo's resignation reached Hansang's leadership, and for the time being Sunwo was assigned to manage Moto Restaurant and shut down his own restaurant, La La Cell. Even though Sunwo felt bad for his staff who had worked hard, his mother still ordered him to close it since their restaurant had already lost. Elsewhere, Yoonju decided to return to the temple in deep sadness. There she remembered Bombo's words about how he couldn't tell his story because it was too difficult for him. The next day a little girl cried because she wanted to eat a cake, so Yoonju was asked to make one, but she felt she couldn't do it because the ingredients and equipment were limited. This made the head nun remind her of the old Yoonju who was full of creative ideas. Yoonju then cooked together with the head nun and succeeded in making a delicious cake.
진짜 맛있어요. 대박.
That night Yoonju talked about all the problems she had been facing. At first she was very angry after being betrayed, but now she kept wondering if she was the only one who had been sincere. The nun realized that Yoonju had changed. Cooking used to be just a hobby, but now she cared more about the people who ate her food. Think about how all of this happened, and you will find the answer you're looking for, she said. Today the diamond announcement was made in front of the media, and Modo restaurant officially received 3 stars. They also added one more restaurant in Korea, and that restaurant was located outside Seoul, Yoonju's restaurant. The news made the Hansang leader immediately contact the TV producer who had been rejected the day before. The information that Yoonju had earned 3 stars also reached Bombo, and he was asked to meet his mother right away. It turned out she had arranged a competition between Modo restaurant and Yoonju's restaurant, a cooking battle that would be broadcast live on television. Bombo had to accept the challenge. If he refused, Yoonju's restaurant would be erased from the food industry because Hansang had already purchased the building. At that moment people began arriving to taste the 3-star dishes at Yoonju's restaurant. Through them Myeongso and Chunsung finally learned that the restaurant had received a 3-star rating. Yoonju also heard the news from the temple visitors after they praised her food. After that Bombo met Myeongso and Chunsung. He could only stay silent as Myeongso expressed all her anger. Bombo admitted all his mistakes and begged them to let him protect Yoonju's restaurant for its survival, but sadly Myeongso refused the competition and no longer trusted him. News about the restaurant earning 3 stars and joining the competition made Yoonju unable to sleep, so she went to the kitchen to cook. However, at that moment, she seemed to see her younger self asking why she was there, because she should be at her own restaurant and questioning how long she would keep running away. Today, the snow has begun to fall. Bombo sat alone in Yoonju's restaurant, lost in thought. Not long after, Myeongso and Chunsung arrived. They had changed their minds and decided to help fight for the restaurant. Although Myeongso still hadn't fully forgiven him, the biggest problem was that Yoonju wasn't there. Even so, Aldo and Hukso came and were ready to help them. Bombo had also gone to the temple to talk to Yoonju, but he was too afraid to face her and instead met the head nun. All this time he thought he was great, but in reality, he was just an ordinary, pathetic man. The head nun later told Yoonju that he had come with regret and sincerity, and she advised Yoonju to return to the restaurant. The cooking competition between Modo restaurant and Yoonju's restaurant was about to begin. The judges for the competition were the head of Hansang Company and a special judge from Diamond's editorial team named Matthew. This shocked Bombo, Myeongso, and Chunsung because they had once served him during a family meeting. It turned out he was also the one who selected Yoonju's restaurant as a Diamond 3-star restaurant. The theme of the competition was chicken. They would prepare a French-style chicken dish with Korean touches, following the recipe written by Yoonju. For that, they needed to prepare all the ingredients first. But even by nightfall, they still couldn't find any chickens. All suppliers had run out of stock, making Bombo realize that the market had been sabotaged so they would lose. Even so, they refused to give up and continued searching by dividing tasks into different areas. Watching their hard work made Yoonju feel ashamed to return. The next day, the competition finally began. TV crews had set up cameras to broadcast the event live. Chef Jang, the head chef of Modo restaurant, worked extremely hard to produce the best results, but this time, things were different because she would present her own recipe. Meanwhile, the one cooking in Yoonju's restaurant was Myeongso. After the dishes were ready, visitors came to taste the food and give their evaluations. Many were food vloggers. Even Chunsung's father was there. He was so impressed by his son's drink that he told him to sell it in their family restaurant. The last guests to visit were the head of Hansang and Matthew. Chef Jang's dish was so delicious that Matthew praised it. That was enough for her to feel satisfied, leading her to resign and leave her apology for Yoonju. Earlier, Yoonju had accidentally met Sungwoo on the street. He told her that both he and Bombo had a mother who cared more about food and restaurants than her own children. Those words made Yoonju visit Yujin to learn about Bombo's past. It turned out his life had been full of suffering. His mother always appeared on TV as an impressive figure, yet she was never there for her children, only his grandmother gave him love and care until she passed away. That was why Bombo became emotional when tasting Yoonju's kimchi, which reminded him of his grandmother's affection. No matter how wrong Bombo's actions had been, meeting Yoonju and her friends in Jangjae village changed him, and Yoojin could only convey his regret and apology, as Bombo was too ashamed to face her. At this moment, the judges have tasted the dishes from Yoonju's restaurant. They will evaluate the food professionally without involving personal feelings. Eventually, the competition results were ready, and the head of Hansang herself was the one who would announce them. However, she suddenly declared the result a tie, even though Yoonju's restaurant should have been the winner. This made Matthew furious, and he immediately left the venue. Shamelessly, the head of Hansang demanded a rematch. Of course, this made Bombo extremely angry. Not long after Yoonju arrived, she challenged her to taste her cooking. If it wasn't good, she would admit defeat, and for that, the head of Hansang was invited to come the next morning. That night, Sungwoo invited Bombo to have drinks together to ask why he left the Hansang company and chose to fight for a small restaurant instead. Deep down, Bombo understood that his mother had worked hard all these years for their lives, but was all of that truly for her children or only for herself, and did his mother ever feel true happiness? The next morning, the head of Hansang came again. While cooking, Yoonju told them to serve Sungwoo and Bombo and have them sit together at one table. The dish she prepared this time was simple home-cooked food, nothing special, yet the warmth and comfort it brought reminded them of family. Yoonju didn't care about the competition, her only goal was to cook wholeheartedly for anyone who came. Although the food made Bombo and Sungwoo feel the warmth of a family, it didn't affect their mother. She only cared about getting good footage to maintain a positive image. But strangely, the head of Hansang decided not to shut down Yoonju's restaurant. She had even started thinking about proper marketing for them. Meanwhile, their mother visited their grandmother's grave with tears in her eyes, but it seems she did it only for the camera. Whether her heart had truly changed or she was just building a better public image remained uncertain. Meanwhile, Yoonju finally forgave everything Bombo had done because she genuinely liked him. But just when a romantic moment was about to happen, Myeongso and Chunsung ruined everything. At the same time, Chef Jang was now selling food from a truck on the roadside. Soon after, Yoojin came to help her because he had also quit his job. By the end of the film, Myeongso finally met the drama star she adored, while Bombo returned the restaurant building to the old man who once tried to burn Yoonju's restaurant. Besides that, his relationship with Yoonju grew better day by day, and eventually, this Korean drama came to an end. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell, and see you in the next videos. Adios.